David W. Williams, also known as Diamond Dave. Let's get into this Laws of Game episode. We're going to talk about the big lie of black excellence, what this lie is, how it's hurting people, some solutions to it, and we're going to wrap it up. Many black people are sold on this black excellence lie, and the lie breaks down like this. Be successful, be better than your counterparts of other races, and also you can't make any mistakes. I'm going to repeat that. You got to go be successful. You just can't be averagely successful. You got to be uber successful. You got to be better than your counterparts of other races. So we know we hear about that. You got to be twice as good as everybody else to get what they're getting. So you got to perform at 200% to get what somebody else is getting, performing at 70%. And you can't make any mistakes. If you make a mistake, it can essentially be the end of you. So you get a chance to make one mistake and that's going to be the end of you. And this is the big lie of black excellence. And we're not arguing against self-accountability. We're not arguing against people being successful. We're not arguing against responsibility. But we're arguing about how this lie has been crafted and sold to black people for so long. And so many black people have invested in this lie. Why? Because they've been socialized that this is the only way things can be. And one of the reasons for this lie is our programming inside the United States, right? So part of our socialization, we talked about before, socialization is more important than information. You can be very successful with a small amount of information, but with socialization that makes you believe you're going to be successful with that small amount of information. And you can have a lot of information, but bad socialization and be unsuccessful because you've been socialized. You're going to be unsuccessful regardless of the information. And one of the things that we discount in our experience is socialization. We just assume that is not important, even though many of you are byproducts of your socialization. I didn't say culture. I said socialization. And many people, because they don't understand what these words actually mean, they'll conflate culture with a socialization. Everybody in America is part of American culture. In fact, black people are the most American than any other group of people in the world. Why? Because they were not allowed to participate in the culture that they had when they came over here. Right? They weren't allowed to. And how do I know this? Because you have black people who are brought from another part of the world who have English Scott names who speak American Standard. Right? You don't have black people who are brought from another part of the world, right, with African names that they didn't give themselves. Therefore, black people are the most Americanized people in the world. So nobody has more American culture than black folks. But our socialization is different than many other Americans. And that's what people don't understand. And I'm not talking about post-traumatic slave disorder. That's not what I'm talking about. See, that's something that they created. What I'm trying to get people to understand is that there is no group that is more Americanized than black Americans. How do I know this? I look at your name, I look at your language, right? And I look at your customs, right? You don't have the customs of where you come from. You have the customs of here. So I live in the greater Metro Houston area. There are people here who still have the language of where they came from, right? And they're accommodated for that language. So I went to a government office the other day, and inside a government office for the state of Texas, we're accommodating people who have a language from another land. We have services to accommodate those people. There are no services for black people to accommodate the language that they had when they came into this country. No services for them. Never were, never will be. Okay? Then we also have people that come from other parts of the world where they are able to practice their culture that they had in the other part of the world, right, inside the United States. Right? Black people were not allowed to do that. Therefore, when you start to buy from these people that the challenge with black people is that they have a culture issue, well, what culture are they talking about? Because black people are more Americanized than any group of people. Why? Because we could not utilize or participate in the culture that we brought over here. So this is why you go to certain parts of the world, they have certain religious or spiritual practices. Everything was practiced in secret. It wasn't practiced in the forefront. So if you go to places like South Carolina, you go to places like New Orleans, people was practicing religious and spirituality in secret, right? Because you weren't allowed to practice these things in the open. Therefore, it doesn't add up from an anthropological, I don't know how to say this word, from a standpoint of anthropology, that there's this cultural reason why black people are not successful unless the culture is American culture. Because you cannot find another group of people that when they came to this land were told that they cannot participate in their culture. I come from South Florida. Cubans came over here. They never stopped speaking Spanish. They also never stopped practicing Santeria, but that's something y'all not ready for. So Cubans came to this country from Cuba. Many of them were fair-skinned Cubans, looked like Anglos, but they never stopped speaking Spanish. And they also never stopped practicing Santeria. They never stopped their family traditions. They never stopped their social traditions. The culture that they had in Cuba, they just brought it to the United States and they just practiced it inside South Florida. You understand me? So they're successful, right, because of their culture that they brought from somewhere else that they were allowed to continue to participate in. You understand me? They're not truly Americanized, because if you go to Miami right now, there's whole places in Miami to where if you don't speak Spanish, you can't even communicate. And many people, to reach out to that particular demographic of people, right, they're learning how to speak Spanish. There's a really prominent conservative commentator who has just recently moved to Florida. He said, well, I'm learning how to speak Spanish. Why are you going to learn how to speak Spanish? This is not a Spanish speaking country. Because he wants to appeal to this conservative audience in South Florida who he knows is not going to speak English for him. And if he wants to move in and out of that area, he's going to have to learn how to speak Spanish, because that is the language of that area. He knows that. So he's going to acquiesce to that particular situation, even though he's going to get on the other end and talk about, you know, we're in a culture war, yada, 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 because that's what sells. So in the day, he's going to do business. We have to understand the difference between culture and socialization. So we have American culture more than any other group, but we have been socialized a certain way. And one of the socialization is that this black excellence lie. So out of this socialization is that we've been programmed that we are born in the wrong, right? So we're born in the wrong, right? We're born the suspect. We're born being profiled, right? And then what we have to do is figure out how to achieve our way into being acceptable. What do I mean by that? You're born, right, being assumed that you did something wrong before you ever did it. People don't have to prove in law that you did something wrong. So you had 3 men in Georgia, one of them who was prior law enforcement. So you would assume that he understood the laws of the state of Georgia. He also understood procedure as an officer because he was retired. And he believed a person had committed a felony, or let's say he believed a person had committed a crime. So let me retract that statement. He believed a person had committed a crime, but he didn't believe the person had committed that crime at that moment, or he didn't believe the person was in the progress of committing a crime. He believed this person had committed a crime days ahead of time. And he and his group took it upon themselves to attempt to abduct this person because he believed this person had committed a crime previously, not even that same day, days ahead of time. Right? Now, that was illegal. But because of his socialization, he believed that this person was wrong. And then now what this person was going to have to do was explain why they were not wrong. And he believed that he was well within his rights to do that. Now, Constitution says you have freedom of movement. You have freedom of association. You have due process. You have all these rights that are supposed to be inalienable to you as an American citizen. But because of socialization, I see this person, they fit a profile of what? A person that's in the wrong. Therefore, I can proceed a certain way. And I don't feel that I'm doing anything wrong because why? I've been socialized that this person is wrong. And then the people in his what? In his culture, right? Reinforce that because when he did it, they didn't see no problem with it. In fact, these idiots videotape what they did because they was too stupid to realize you are attempting to abduct somebody, which is illegal. You do not have a right to stop someone as a private citizen and try to coerce them against their will to go with you, or impede their freedom of movement because of how you feel, unless certain things have already taken place. And you have to be a witness or have knowledge of these things taking place, or have a reasonable belief that these things had just taken place. You just can't take a flyer on this. Why? Because an American citizen has the ability, right, to be left alone. You don't have a right just to abduct people, but you do if you believe that, you know what, this person is wrong until I say so. Now, I'm not operating on the color of law. I'm operating as a private citizen, but this person is wrong until I say so. Why? Because that's how I've been socialized. And then my culture backs up my play. So then when they find out what I did, they say, well, we don't see what the crime is. Now, the other guy had criminal. He was a criminal. But the guy that really committed the crime, we don't see no crime there. So they reinforce this behavior. So you got to understand, many of us have bought into this lie that, you know what, I was born wrong. I'm a bad person. I got to be redeemed in the eyes of somebody else, not in the eyes of God. I got to be redeemed in the eyes of man. If you know the word, you know where you're going with that. But see, these people don't know the word. They know theology. They don't know the word. Because if you believe that you're born wrong in the eyes of man, and so only man can redeem you, we got a whole nother set of problems. But that's only if you know the word. Now, if you don't know the word, then you'll just continue down that road. You understand me? So the narrative in this particular area is that you were born wrong in the eyes of man. Therefore, you got to redeem yourself in the eyes of man. Then, therefore, what you're supposed to do is figure out, what do you need to do to redeem yourself and to get your innocence back in the eyes of man. That's what you're supposed to be doing. This is what you're supposed to be consumed with in this black excellence lie. So we spend our whole life trying to figure out, how can we seem to be acceptable? What do I need to do to make these people feel like I'm acceptable? Now this stuff, because like I said, because you're dealing with man, it's going to change day to day. It's going to change decade to decade. It's going to change based on, you know, what particular profession or area. So you might be with this group of people and they may tell you, well, this is what you got to do to be acceptable, to be seen as innocent in our eyes. Then you go to a whole nother group of people and they're going to tell you something different. So then you spend your time trying to balance this situation out to try to placate these people because you bought into this lie, right? That I was born guilty, I'm wrong, and I got to figure out how to be deemed acceptable in the eyes of man. Okay. Now we see this playing out in the workplace. We see this playing out in business. We see this playing out in media all the time. We've been socialized that this is normal. Why? Because we was born into it. We've seen this our whole life. And many black people, even though they don't want to admit it, but I see it, they spend their life tiptoeing because they believe that one mistake gonna end it all. I was a email marketer, an email vendor at one time. Did it for about 4 or 5 years. And I was taught this business by a mentor. It was a white dude up out of upstate New York, but he was living in Arizona at that time. Really, really good mentor. Paid him a lot of money, but he taught me how to make a lot of money. And the business model was very much relationship based. Therefore, it doesn't matter how much you automated it. The business part of it was relationship based. It's almost like real estate. You know, you could automate a lot of real estate, but real estate at the end of the day is relationships. It's networks. It's connections. And I was dealing with these real estate vendors, and majority of them were Anglos. Had a few Asians in it, but majority of them were Anglos. Now, they weren't all bad because the guys that were selling me the majority of my traffic was 2 Swedish dudes. But see, Swedish people are socialized different. They come from a different culture. So their socialization is different because of where they're from. But when I was doing business with a lot of Anglo-Americans, okay, they kind of just thought that, you know, it was just going to go however they wanted it to go. And that wasn't going to happen with me. And so I had to let them know in a lot of different situations, like, I'm just not that guy. I know what you may be used to. I know what some of these other dudes may be doing in that space, but I'm just not that dude. I'm just not. And one day my mentor reached out to me. He was like, I understand what you're trying to do. I just don't want you to, put yourself in a bad position to where people won't do business with you. And I say, I appreciate you reaching out to me, but I'm not going to let these guys believe that they can do business with me any old kind of way, because I know I'm not doing anything wrong. And that's kind of how they tried to deal with you, to where you just was going to take whatever they was giving you with just the hope that they would do some business with you. And I wasn't going to play that game. So I built out my own relationships, and that's how I got connected to the Swedish dudes, because I had to figure out how could I be successful outside of this particular ecosystem, because that ecosystem was not designed for me to be successful. When I was dealing with these Swedes, never had an issue with them. They was extremely polite. They was on the level with everything. They tried their best to make sure I was happy with the business we was doing. Why? Because they were socialized different. Their socialization in their country was different as opposed to dealing with an Anglo-American, right? And that's what people don't understand. So a lot of times it's not just the ethnicity. A lot of times it's the national identity. Many Americans, when they do business with other people, they don't realize, right, that other people really don't like doing business with Americans because of our attitude. But inside America, it seems normal. Why? Because it's part of American culture, right? But I'm supposed to believe that black people don't have American culture. We got our own separate culture in America, even though, we live dispersed all over the country. I mean, it is what it is. Now, we want to ask ourselves, why does this happen? Right? Why do so many black people spend their life tiptoeing, worrying about, okay, I'm wrong from the start. I'm going to be seen as guilty. So I can't make a mistake because I got to be seen acceptable in the eyes of man to the people who taught me this theology, that I got to be acceptable in the eyes of man. And one of the reasons why they got to do that is because they lack systems. Now, what do I mean by they lack systems, right? What do I mean by that? This is what I mean. When you don't have systems to promote people in your group, you are dependent upon promotion of other groups. Okay, I'm gonna repeat myself. When you don't have systems to promote people in your group, you're dependent 100% on promotion from other groups. So let's look at South Florida as an example. If you're born Cuban in South Florida, you don't need to go to other groups to get promoted in your group. You can, but you don't need to. You can stay in that South Florida bubble. You can speak Spanish, with your Cuban dialect, right? You can practice Santeria, and nobody's going to judge you because they're all practicing Santeria. Nobody's going to look down on you. You don't have to worry about Anglos not liking your religion because they believe through their theology that they fundamentalist, even though they're Calvinists, but they believe they fundamentalist because of their theology. You don't have to worry about none of that. You can stay in your bubble down in South Miami. You can speak your Cuban dialect of Spanish. You can eat your food that you want to eat. You can practice Santeria, and you will be promoted within your group as long as you are cool with the people in your group.